Jun-won Song was tired of pretending to be calm. He stood at the front of the old ferry hall in Marquette, Michigan, in a black suit he did not choose, next to a woman he had never spoken to. The hall smelled like lake water and old wood. Guests filled every chair. Some were his father's men, dressed nice, but still watching every door, still counting exits, out of habit. He had heard the rumors for weeks, that the Ferris girl was plain, that she kept her face covered because there was nothing worth seeing under that veil. His cousin Sua had said at first, at dinner, with a small laugh she probably thought was kind, "Maybe that is why she hides herself, Jun-won. Maybe you should thank your father for the veil." He did not believe rumors, usually, but he was angry. Not at the woman beside him, at the arrangement itself, at a promise made before he was born, one he never agreed to, one that tied his name to a stranger's because of something that happened at a lighthouse 40 years ago. So, when the officiant finished the last line and said he could greet his bride, Jun-won reached up, maybe out of anger, maybe just to get it over with, and pulled the veil back in one motion. The hall went quiet. Sable Ferris did not flinch. She stood there, chin lifted, dark eyes steady, like she had expected exactly this. Her skin caught the light coming through the tall windows. She was not plain. She was not anything close to plain. Gasps moved through the room like wind through grass. For a moment, nobody moved. Not the guests. Not the officiant who stood frozen with the small book still open in his hands. Not even the two men by the door who usually noticed everything before anyone else did. The whole hall had gone completely silent, and nobody seemed to know what to do with that silence now that it was there. Jun-won's hand was still half raised. He lowered it slowly. "You look surprised," Sable said. Her voice was calm, maybe too calm. He hesitated. "I expected someone else." "You expected a rumor," she said. "Not a person." Somewhere behind them, his Aunt Sua had gone very still, her smile frozen in a strange shape. Jun-won noticed it. He filed it away. His father, Jun-won Song, sat in the front row with his hands folded, watching everything with the kind of stillness that made people nervous even when he was not trying. He did not smile. He did not frown either. He simply watched his son stare at the woman standing in front of him like the whole room had disappeared. An older woman near the back whispered something to the man beside her. Whatever she said made him laugh, quiet and quick, before he covered it with a cough. Sable felt every eye in that hall. Maybe that should have scared her. Instead, something steadied inside her, the same steadiness her grandmother used to have, the kind that did not shake just because a room was staring. "Are you going to say something else?" Sable asked, "or was the veil the only speech you had prepared?" A few guests near the front heard that. Someone laughed, quickly turning it into a cough of their own. Jun-won's mouth twitched, almost a smile, gone before it fully arrived. "I did not prepare a speech," he admitted. "I was not planning on needing one." "Maybe start preparing," Sable said. "This does not seem like the kind of arrangement where silence works forever." 3 days before the wedding, Sable had sat across from her father, Colin Ferris, in the back room of their bookstore on 3rd Street. The store had been in the family since before Marquette had paved roads downtown. Books stacked to the ceiling. The smell of paper and coffee and old glue. "I don't understand why it has to be me," Sable said. Collins rubbed his eyes. He looked older than he had a year ago. "Your grandmother made a promise, Sable. A real one. Not the kind you break. To people she barely knew. To the man who pulled her out of a fire," Collins said. "Jun-won Song was 17 years old. Your grandmother was 11. The lighthouse keeper's house caught fire in the middle of the night, and everyone thought there was no way out. He went in anyway. Nobody made him. Sable had heard pieces of this story her whole life, but never all of it, never straight through. And the promise was marriage? That seems like a strange way to say thank you. The promise was help, Colin said. Whatever kind was needed, whenever it was needed, between our family and his. Dahlia did not know back then it would become this. Neither did he. But things changed. Businesses changed. And somewhere along the way, the Song family decided the debt could only be settled one way. That's not fair to either of us, Sable said quietly. No, Collins admitted. It is not. Sable stood and walked toward the window, watching the snow drift sideways past the street lamp outside. You could have said no. Somewhere in 40 years, somebody could have said no. I tried, Collins said, and his voice cracked just slightly on the word, small enough that she almost missed it. 2 years ago, I told Hyun-ki the debt did not need to fall on you. He agreed, actually, for a while. But then the store started struggling, and then the bank started calling. And I am ashamed to admit, I let his offer stand a little longer than I should have, because it solved a problem I did not know how to solve any other way. Sable turned around slowly. So this is about money, too. It was never supposed to be, Colin said, but I am not going to lie to you and pretend it stayed separate. Not anymore. That admission sat heavy in the room. Sable had always believed her father was simply honoring an old promise out of love for her grandmother. Learning there was more underneath it, quiet and practical and a little bit desperate, made something in her chest twist. Why didn't you tell me that part before now? She asked. Because I was hoping I would not have to, Colin said. Because some things a father wants to carry alone, even when he cannot. She almost told him then. About the letter. About the one thing she had not shared with anyone, tucked inside her coat pocket, folded into a small square. But she did not. Not yet. Maybe she was still deciding if it mattered. Maybe she was scared it did. After the ceremony, there was a dinner that felt more like a business meeting than a wedding. Long tables, low conversation. Jun-won sat at the head with Sable beside him, and for a while, neither of them said much. You didn't want this either, Sable said finally. It was not a question. No, Jun-won said, but I stopped fighting it 2 years ago. Why? He turned his glass slowly, not drinking from it. Because my father is not a patient man, and because some debts, once they're spoken out loud in front of enough people, cannot be taken back without shame falling on somebody. So, we're just supposed to live with it, Sable said. Two strangers. Maybe Jun-won said, or maybe not forever. She looked at him properly then, for the first time since the veil came off. There was something tired behind his eyes, not cruelty, not the coldness she expected from a man his family called a boss like it was a normal job title. Just tired. My aunt told everyone you were unremarkable, Jun-won said. I should not have believed her. That was wrong of me. You believed a rumor because it was easier than believing your father, Sable said. I understand that better than you think. He almost smiled. Almost. Can I ask you something, Sable said. And you actually answer it honestly? Depends on the question. Do you want to be here? Not tonight. In general. In this life. The business, the men watching every door, all of it. Jun-won was quiet long enough that Sable thought he might not answer at all. There was a version of me a long time ago that wanted something smaller, he said, finally. A regular job. A regular last name that did not make people nervous when I introduced myself. But That version of me made a lot of decisions based on what I wanted instead of what my family needed, and it cost people I cared about. So no, I do not always want this. But I stopped asking the question mostly because the answer never changed anything. That sounds lonely, Sable said. Probably, Jun-won admitted. But still, it is what it is. Sable studied him for a moment, the tired lines around his eyes, the way he sat like a man permanently bracing for something. My grandmother used to say the loneliest people are usually the ones surrounded by the most rules. She sounds like she understood a lot. She did, Sable said. I wish I had asked her more questions before she passed. There is a lot about this whole arrangement I am only learning now in pieces from other people. Later, near the end of the night, a woman approached Sable near the coat room. She was maybe 60, sharp-eyed, dressed simply. Sable recognized her as Priscilla Vantries, the Ferris family's longtime lawyer, the one who had handled her grandmother's estate. You look well, Priscilla said. Considering. Considering what? Considering how quickly this all came together, Priscilla said. Her tone was pleasant, but something underneath, it was not. I only wonder if your father told you everything. Or just enough. Sable's stomach tightened. What does that mean? It means your grandmother wrote more than one letter before she passed, Priscilla said. I handled her estate. I know what was filed and what was not. There is a difference between honoring somebody's wishes and honoring the parts of their wishes that are convenient. Are you saying my father hid something from me? Priscilla's smile did not reach her eyes. I am saying grief makes people selective. That is all. I am not accusing anyone of anything tonight. You're doing something, Sable said, just maybe not accusing. Priscilla glanced toward the tables, toward Collins, who was deep in conversation with an older Korean man Sable assumed was Jun-won's father. Nothing you need to worry about tonight, she said. Congratulations, dear. Truly. She walked away before Sable could ask anything else. Sable stood there a long moment, watching Priscilla's back disappear into the crowd, the folded letter in her pocket suddenly feeling heavier than before. She thought about opening it right there in the coat room, with music drifting in from the hall. But some part of her was not ready. Maybe she was scared of what honesty from a dead woman might cost her. Jun-won's right hand, a quiet man named Min-jun Beck, found him outside near the water an hour later. The lake was dark and endless, the kind of dark that made a person feel small in a good way. Sometimes you did not have to tear the veil off like that, Min-jun said, in front of everyone. I know, Jun-won said. Your aunt is furious. She says you embarrassed her. She spread a lie for weeks, Jun-won said. Maybe she should be embarrassed. Min-jun was quiet for a moment. Or maybe she was not lying about what she believed. Maybe someone told her that lie first. Jun-won turned to look at him. You think someone wanted the marriage to fail before it started? I think it is worth asking who benefits if it does, Min-jun said. Your aunt does not gain anything from you being married to a stranger. But she gains plenty if this alliance collapses and your father turns to her side of the family instead. Jun-won said nothing for a long moment, watching the water move. There is something else. Min-jun added, hesitating like he was not sure he should say it. The rumor did not start here. It started in Detroit weeks before Sua ever repeated it. Somebody in the Ferris family's circle said it first, and it traveled north from there. Jun-won turned fully now, eyes sharp. Somebody close to Sable started this. Maybe not on purpose, Min-jun said. Maybe it was meant to protect her from the marriage happening at all. A rumor ugly enough might have made your father reconsider the arrangement completely. But it did not work. He wanted the alliance regardless. So, whoever started it failed, Jun-won said slowly, and now they're watching a wedding they tried to stop. That would be my guess, Min-jun said. Jun-won looked back toward the lit windows of the hall, toward the shape of Sable moving somewhere inside, laughing at something her friend had said. Find out who, he said, finally, quietly. I do not want my father involved yet. Not until I understand what we are dealing with. And if it leads back to someone in her family, Min-jun asked, then I need to know before she finds out the hard way, Jun-won said. Back inside, Sable found her best friend, Journey Wexler, waiting by the door with 2 coats and an expression that said she had questions. So, Journey said, once they were outside in the cold, he ripped a veil off your face in front of 200 people, and you're not even mad? I'm a lot of things right now, Sable said. Mad is somewhere in there. So is confused. About him? About everything, Sable said. She pulled her coat tighter. Priscilla said something weird to me tonight. About my father not telling me everything. Journey frowned. Everything about what? I don't know, Sable said. But I don't think this is just about a promise from 40 years ago. I think there's more to it. And I think somebody wanted me to look foolish tonight, before I even got the chance to say a word. Who would do that? Sable thought of the rumor, of Sua's careful little smile at that dinner months ago that had somehow reached all the way to Marquette, of Priscilla's warning wrapped up like a compliment. I don't know yet, Sable said, but I'm going to find out. Journey was quiet for a moment, studying her friend's face in the streetlight. You seem different tonight. Not bad different, just different. I feel different, Sable admitted. I walked into that hall thinking I was just going to survive the night. Get through the ceremony, be polite, go home and figure out the rest later. But something about the way he looked at me after that veil came off, like he genuinely did not expect me to be a real person with a real face, made me realize how small this whole thing has made me feel for months. And I am tired of feeling small. So what now? Now, I stop waiting for people to tell me the truth in pieces, Sable said. My father, Priscilla, whoever started that rumor. I am done being the last one to understand my own life. She touched the folded letter in her pocket again, the one with her grandmother's handwriting on the outside, the one she had not opened since it arrived 3 weeks ago with no explanation at all. Journey noticed the movement. What is that? A letter, Sable said. From my grandmother. I have been carrying it around for 3 weeks, and I have not been brave enough to read it. Why not? Because I think whatever is inside is going to change how I see everything, Sable said. My father, this marriage, maybe even myself. Journey reached over and squeezed her hand once, firm and steady, the way she had done since they were 9 years old and Sable's mother passed. Then read it when you're ready. Not before. Sable nodded. But as she looked down at the small folded square in her palm, she had a feeling ready was coming a lot sooner than she expected. Whatever was inside it, she had a feeling it was not going to make things simpler. If anything, it was probably going to make everything worse. Across town, in a house overlooking the same dark water, Priscilla Vantry sat at her kitchen table with a single lamp on, staring at a folder she had kept locked in her desk for 3 weeks. She had not shown it to Collins. She had not shown it to Sable. Not yet. Maybe not ever, if things worked out the way she hoped. She picked up her phone and typed a short message to a number she had not contacted in years. Then she deleted it. Then she typed it again. Drop a comment telling me who you think is behind the rumor, because trust me, it is not who you're expecting. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part, because this is about to get a lot more twisted. And if you're new here, welcome, because you picked a good day to start watching. Sable read the letter 3 times before she believed it. She sat on the edge of her childhood bed, back in the small house on Ridge Street where she grew up, the one her father still kept even after she moved into her own apartment above the bookstore. The wedding dress hung on the closet door, still zipped in its bag. Outside, snow kept falling quiet and steady, the kind Marquette got most of the winter. The letter was in her grandmother's handwriting, small and slanted, the same handwriting that used to fill grocery lists and birthday cards. Sable, if you are reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. I want you to know the marriage was not only my debt to repay, it was my idea years before Hyun-ki ever brought it up to your father. I watched that boy grow up angry and afraid of becoming his father, and I believed, foolishly maybe, that the right person could change the direction of his whole life. I wrote to him for 6 years after the fire. Nobody knew, not even your father. I have his letters hidden behind the loose board in my closet if you ever want proof. I am not asking you to love a stranger, Sable. I am asking you to trust that I saw something in him worth seeing long before you ever did. Sable set the letter down slowly. Her grandmother had been writing to Jun-won for 6 years. Not the family. Not out of obligation. On purpose. Quietly, the way Dahlia did most important things. Sable thought back to every story she had ever heard about her grandmother growing up, how Dahlia was known around Marquette for showing up at exactly the right moment, for a family that needed groceries left on their porch, for a kid struggling in school, who suddenly found a tutor nobody could explain. Dahlia never wanted credit. She just wanted things fixed, quietly from somewhere behind the scenes. Maybe this was the same thing, just bigger. Maybe her grandmother had looked at a scared, guilty teenager and decided fixing him mattered more than following whatever plan his own family had for his life. She thought of the tired look in Jun-won's eyes at dinner, the way he said he stopped asking whether he wanted this life, mostly because the answer never changed anything. Maybe her grandmother had known that answer would change, eventually, given enough time. Maybe she had been counting on it. Sable stood and walked to her old closet, the one still in this house, and pressed against the wall until she found the loose board her grandmother mentioned. It gave way easier than expected, like it had been opened many times before, worn smooth at the edges. Behind it sat a small wooden box, dusty, tied shut with a faded ribbon. Her hands were not quite steady opening it. For a moment she almost put it back. Whatever was in that box would change how she saw her grandmother, and maybe how she saw the entire arrangement she had spent weeks resenting. Part of her wanted to stay angry a little longer. It felt safer than the alternative, but curiosity won, the way it always did with her. She lifted the lid. Across town, Jun-won sat in his father's study, a room he avoided most of the time because it smelled like cigars and old paper, and every conversation in it felt like a negotiation. Min-jun stood by the window, arms crossed. "I found something," Min-jun said. "The rumor. It did not come from a stranger." Jun-won looked up. "Who?" "A man named Elias Rutherfield," Min-jun said. "He works for a shipping brokerage in Detroit. Small operation. He has done occasional work for the Ferris family bookstore, moving inventory, nothing significant. But he also, as it turns out, has done work for your Aunt Sua's husband for the last 2 years. Jun-won sat back slowly. So Sua did not invent the rumor. She heard it from someone connected to her own husband's business. That is what it looks like, Min-jun said, which raises the question of whether Sua started this or whether somebody used her to spread it without her fully understanding why. Do we know why Rutherfield would care about my marriage at all? Jun-won asked. He is a shipping broker. That is a strange person to plant a rumor about a family he barely does business with. Unless somebody paid him to, Min-jun said, I checked what I could without drawing attention. Nothing obvious yet. No large deposits, no unusual contracts. But men like that rarely leave the money where anyone can find it right away. Keep looking, Jun-won said, and find out who else Rutherfield has worked for. If he asked questions about the Ferris family before the engagement was even announced, somebody wanted information early. That is not a rumor spreading naturally. That is somebody building a case. A case for what? I do not know yet, Jun-won admitted, but nobody spends months quietly gathering information on a bookstore owner's daughter unless they expect to use it eventually. Min-jun hesitated before speaking again. There's something else. Something I probably should have mentioned first. Say it. Your father knew about the rumor before the wedding, Min-jun said. Weeks before. He chose not to stop it. Jun-won went very still. Why would he let that happen? I don't know, Min-jun admitted, but it seems strange that a man who controls almost everything that happens in this family somehow missed a rumor that traveled through 3 cities before reaching his own son's ears. Jun-won stared at the closed door of the study, the one that led to his father's private office, the one he was rarely invited into. He thought back to the wedding, to his father's stillness in the front row, the way Hyun-ki had watched the whole veil moment unfold without a single flicker of surprise on his face. Maybe that stillness had not been calm at all. Maybe it had been a man watching a plan play out exactly the way he expected it to. Something about the whole arrangement suddenly felt less like an old promise and more like a plan he was not being told the shape of. Tomorrow, Sable said. The lighthouse, maybe. Nobody goes out there in winter. Tomorrow, he agreed. The next morning, Sable's cousin Delphine showed up at the bookstore unannounced, stomping snow off her boots and looking like she had something to say before she even opened the door. I heard about the veil thing, Delphine said. Everybody heard about the veil thing. It's all anyone in this family is talking about. Wonderful, Sable said flatly. Delphine leaned against the counter. She was younger than Sable by 6 years, sharp-tongued, the kind of relative who noticed things other people missed because nobody expected her to be paying attention. Can I tell you something? Probably should have told you weeks ago, but I didn't think it mattered until now. Sable set down the book she was shelving. What? A man came around asking questions about you back in fall, Delphine said. Before any of this wedding stuff got announced publicly, asked my mom about you, about the family, about whether the bookstore was struggling. I thought he was just some nosy reporter or something. But now I'm wondering, did you get a name? Rutherfield, maybe, Delphine said, frowning like she was trying to pull the memory into focus. Something like that. He had a notebook, real official looking, asked a lot of questions like he already knew half the answers and just wanted my mom to confirm them. What kind of questions? Money stuff, mostly, Delphine said. Whether the store had ever taken out loans. Whether your dad had ever borrowed from anyone outside a bank. My mom didn't know most of it, so she couldn't really tell him much. But she said he seemed disappointed by that, like he was hoping for more. Sable's stomach dropped. The same name Min-jun had found, though she had no way of knowing that yet. Somebody was asking about us before the engagement was even public, Sable said slowly. That means whoever started that rumor knew about this marriage before I did. Delphine shrugged, but her eyes were serious. Maybe. Or somebody wanted to know enough about us to decide if spreading a rumor was even worth the trouble. Why would a rumor about my looks be worth anybody's trouble, Sable said. It doesn't make sense. Unless the goal was never really about how I look. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it was never about making me seem unremarkable, Sable said, thinking it through as she spoke. Maybe it was about making the whole arrangement seem unremarkable. Something not worth taking seriously. Something people could joke about at dinner instead of paying attention to. Delphine tilted her head. So a distraction. Maybe, Sable said, or a delay. If Jun-won's father had second thoughts because of a rumor, even briefly, that might have bought somebody time to do something else. I just do not know what. Sable thought of Priscilla, of the folder Min-jun and Jun-won did not yet know existed, of the strange warning in the coat room, that now felt less like a warning and more like a confession Priscilla had almost, but not quite, made out loud. Priscilla had known Dahlia for decades. Priscilla had handled the estate. If anyone had access to information worth hiding, it was her. There's one more thing, Delphine said, lowering her voice even though the store was empty. My mom said the man mentioned a name before he left. Said it almost like he was testing to see if she recognized it. Vantries. Sable went very still. Priscilla. I don't know if it was her exactly, Delphine said. Could have been a relative, but it stuck with my mom because it's not a common name around here. Sable's mind raced back through every interaction she'd had with Priscilla, every carefully worded comment that sounded like concern but landed like a threat. Whoever was pulling strings here had been doing it long before Sable ever put on that veil, and it was starting to look like the trail led somewhere much closer to home than anyone had guessed. Make sure you're subscribed because this is where the real betrayal comes out into the open. Let me know in the comments if you're starting to suspect who's really behind all of this, because some of you are closer than you think. See you in the next part. Comment below if you already suspect Priscilla's real connection to this family, because you are either about to be right or about to be completely wrong. Let's get into it. The lighthouse sat at the edge of a point outside Marquette, closed for winter, snow piled against its base in soft, uneven drifts. Sable got there first, her boots crunching against the frozen path, the cold air stinging her cheeks. Jun-won arrived a few minutes later, alone, no car full of men trailing behind him like usual. You came without Min-jun, Sable said. Some conversations should not have an audience, Jun-won said, even a trusted one. They stood near the old lighthouse door, sheltered slightly from the wind coming off the lake. For a moment, neither spoke. The water below them moved slow and dark, ice forming in patches along the rocks. I kept thinking about your letters last night, Sable said. Finally, the kid who did not know how to say no to his father. It is strange meeting that version of you on paper before meeting the version of you standing in front of me. Which version do you like better? Jun-won asked, and there was something almost playful underneath the question, a lightness she had not heard from him before. Ask me again once we figure out who is trying to take my family's land, Sable said. Fair, he said. She pulled a folded paper from her coat, the note where she had written down what Delphine told her. Rutherfield, she said, asking questions about our finances back in the fall. And a name my cousin's mother heard a mention. Vantries. Jun-won's expression sharpened. Min-jun traced Rutherfield to a shipping brokerage connected to my Aunt Sua's husband. So they're the same thread, Sable said. Whoever hired Rutherfield knew both families before either of us knew about this wedding. There's more, Jun-won said. I looked into Sua's husband myself last night. His company has been trying to acquire lakefront property along this stretch of coastline for almost 2 years. Small parcels, mostly, bought quietly from owners who did not know the land was about to become valuable. Sable frowned. What does that have to do with my family? Your bookstore sits on land that used to belong to the lighthouse keeper's estate, Jun-won said. Your grandmother's family. If I am reading old county records correctly, there's a clause tied to that land, something about mineral and shoreline rights. That could make it worth far more than anyone in your family probably realizes. Sable's stomach turned. You're saying somebody wants our land. I'm saying somebody wants it enough to spend months gathering information before deciding how to get it, Jun-won said. A rumor that damages an alliance. Financial pressure on your father. Maybe more we have not found yet. Why go through all that trouble, Sable asked. Why not just make an offer? People sell land all the time. Because your father would never sell willingly, Jun-won said. Not that land. Not the store your grandmother built her whole life around. The only way somebody gets it is if he has no choice left. That takes patience. And it takes making sure nobody notices what is actually happening until it is already done. Sable pulled her coat tighter, the wind cutting sharper, now off the water. That's cold, even for people like your aunt's husband. Money makes people cold, Jun-won said quietly. I have watched it happen more times than I want to admit. They were still standing there, working through it, when a car pulled up along the gravel road below the point. Sable recognized it before the door even opened. Priscilla stepped out, wrapped in a heavy coat, moving carefully over the icy ground. I followed you, Priscilla said, once she reached them. I am sorry. I have been following you on and off for days. Actually, I needed to know if you were close to figuring this out on your own before I decided whether to say anything. Say what? Sable said, her voice tight. Priscilla exhaled slowly, looking older suddenly than she had at the wedding. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. I am not your enemy, Sable. I know how it looked that night at the wedding. I know the things I said probably sounded like a threat. They were not. They were the closest I could come to warning you without breaking a promise I made to your grandmother a long time ago. What promise, Sable said, that I would protect this family's interests quietly, no matter what it cost me, Priscilla said. Your grandmother was my older sister, Sable. Half-sister, if we are being precise about it. Different fathers. It is not something either of us advertised for reasons that made sense a long time ago and stopped mattering to me years back. Sable stared at her. You're my great-aunt. I am, Priscilla said. Our mother remarried after my father passed, and Dahlia was already grown by then, already married herself, already building the life your family knows. I came along much later, raised almost like a stranger to her, though she never treated me that way once I was old enough to matter to her. She got me my first job. She is the reason I became a lawyer at all. I owe her more than most people owe anyone. Then why let me believe you were threatening me, Sable asked. Why not just tell me the truth from the start? Because I did not have proof yet, Priscilla said, and because telling a young woman 2 nights before her wedding that somebody might be plotting against her entire family without anything solid to back it up seemed crueler than staying quiet a little longer. I have spent months chasing pieces of this. I did not want to hand you fear without also handing you answers. Jun-won studied her carefully. How long have you suspected Sua's husband specifically? Almost a year, Priscilla said. I noticed him asking odd questions at a fundraiser in Grand Rapids, questions about shoreline zoning that had nothing to do with anything he claimed to be interested in. I did not think much of it at first. Then Rutherfield's name started surfacing near your family, and I remembered the fundraiser, and I started paying closer attention. You could have told my father, Sable said. Your father, Priscilla said gently, is not always the best at hiding what he knows. If I had told him, and he had confronted anyone too soon, whoever is behind this would have simply covered their tracks better and waited for another opportunity. I needed proof solid enough that it could not be denied. I needed it before this conversation happened, not after. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin folder, handing it to Sable. Documents, Priscilla said. A contract between Sua's husband and a development company out of Grand Rapids. It outlines a plan to acquire several shoreline properties, including the parcel your bookstore sits on, contingent on the Ferris family defaulting on debt within the next year. Jun-won took the folder, scanning it quickly, his jaw tightening as he read. This name's a deadline. 8 months from now, which is roughly when the original loan on your bookstore comes due, Priscilla said to Sable. The one your father took out 2 years ago, the one he mentioned to you recently. Sua's husband has been counting on that default happening naturally. The rumor was meant to delay or collapse this marriage, because if this alliance held, your father would have the backing to cover that loan easily. Without it, he would not. Sable felt the pieces slide into place, cold and clear. So, this was never really about me at all. It became about you the moment you were the one standing in that hall, Priscilla said, gently. But no, at its heart, this was always about the land. Jun-won closed the folder slowly. My father knew about the rumor before the wedding. He let it happen anyway. Because stopping the rumor would not have stopped the plan behind it, Priscilla said, I suspect your father figured out enough of this on his own. Maybe not everything, but enough to understand that pushing the marriage forward quickly was the safest way to protect the Ferris family's assets, even if it meant letting a little gossip do damage along the way. A rumor is embarrassing. A land grab is permanent. That does not make it right, Jun-won said. He should have told me. Your father rarely tells anyone anything until he has already decided how the story ends, Priscilla said. That is not an excuse. It is simply who he is. How long have you known that he knew? Sable asked. I suspected at the moment I heard how quickly the wedding date moved up, Priscilla said. Weeks earlier than originally planned. I assumed at first it was simple impatience on his part. Now, I think it was closer to urgency. He may have understood the loan deadline mattered more than any of us realized. Sable looked down at the folder in Jun-won's hands, at her family's future reduced to a few pages of legal language and a deadline 8 months away. Something about seeing it written so plainly made it feel more real than any conversation had. What do we do now? Now, we make sure Sua's husband does not get 8 more months to finish what he started, Priscilla said. But we do it carefully. He does not know I have this folder. If he realizes we know, he may move faster or hide his tracks better. What would moving faster even look like? Sable asked. Pressure on your father to sell sooner, Priscilla said, or an attempt to buy the loan itself from the bank quietly so he controls the terms of default directly instead of waiting for it to happen naturally. Men like him rarely have only one plan. Then we need to move faster too, Jun-won said. Carefully, Priscilla repeated, giving him a pointed look. Your family's version of moving fast tends to involve consequences none of us want here. This needs to stay a legal and financial fight. Nothing more. Jun-won held her gaze for a moment before nodding once, accepting the boundary without arguing it. "Does my father know any of this?" Sable asked. Priscilla's expression softened, just slightly. "No, and I think it is time he did. Not from me. From you." "Why me?" "Because he has spent your whole life trying to shield you from hard things," Priscilla said. "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a parent like that is show him you no longer need shielding. Show him you can carry hard news and still stand upright afterward." Sable thought of her father in the back room of the bookstore, rubbing his eyes, looking older than he had a year ago. She thought of every conversation where he had chosen to carry a burden alone rather than hand her half of it. "All right," she said, "I'll tell him." The walk back to the cars was quiet. Sable held the folder against her chest, the wind pulling at the edges of her coat, the lake stretching gray and endless beside them. Priscilla had already driven off, leaving the two of them alone at the edge of the point. "For what it is worth," Jun-won said, "I do not think either of us walked into this arrangement the way we thought we did." "No," Sable agreed. "We walked into something a lot bigger." "Are you angry about all of it?" Sable considered the question honestly before answering. "I was, mostly at my father, for not telling me things. At your family, for treating this like a business deal instead of two actual people's lives. But standing here now, I think I am mostly just tired of everyone in my life deciding what I need to know and when. My father, Priscilla, even my grandmother in her own way, even though I understand why she did what she did. That makes two of us," Jun-won said. "My whole life, decisions get made somewhere above me, and I find out after they are already finished. I used to think that was just how families like mine worked. Now, I am starting to think it is simply how people avoid difficult conversations, no matter what family they come from." "Maybe that is something we do differently," Sable said. "Whatever this ends up becoming between us. No deciding things for the other person and explaining it later." "I would like that," Jun-won said, and he meant it. She could tell in the plain and steady way he said it. They reached the cars in silence, but before Sable got in hers, she turned back. "Whatever happens with the land, with the loan, with all of it," she said, "I want to be part of figuring it out. Not protected from it. Not managed around it." Jun-won nodded slowly. "I think that is the first thing either of us has agreed on without hesitating." Sable almost smiled at that, small and tired, but real. "There is something else," Jun-won added before she could open her car door. "My father is hosting a dinner in 3 days. Business associates, some of them the same people who have been circling this land deal without saying so directly. If Priscilla is right about Sua's husband wanting to move quickly once he suspects we know something, that dinner might be where he shows his hand." "You want me there," Sable said. "It was not quite a question. I want you there because you understand your family's finances better than anyone else who could sit at that table," Jun-won said. "And because I think people underestimate you the same way I did at the wedding. Sometimes that is useful." Sable considered it, the cold biting at her fingers where she gripped the folder. "All right, I'll come, but I want to know everything about who's going to be in that room before I walk in blind again." "I'll make sure of it," Jun-won said. She drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, already rehearsing somewhere in the back of her mind exactly how she was going to tell her father everything Priscilla had just handed her. She had a feeling that conversation was going to be harder than anything that had happened at the wedding. She had no idea yet how right she was. When she pulled into the driveway on Ridge Street, the porch light was already on, which was strange, since her father usually kept the store open until closing and did not get home until well after dark. His truck sat in its usual spot, engine still ticking faintly like it had not been off long. Sable sat in her car a moment, the folder heavy in her lap, gathering whatever nerve she had left after the afternoon she'd just had. Through the front window, she could see her father moving around the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, pacing the way he only paced when something had him rattled. She could not hear the words, but she could see his shoulders tight and hunched, and the way he kept running a hand over his face like a man trying to keep himself steady. Whatever that call was about, it did not look like good news. Sable stepped out of the car slowly, the cold biting at her cheeks, the folder tucked under her arm. She had planned this conversation the entire drive home, every sentence, every gentle way to ease her father into the truth. Watching him through that window, phone still pressed to his ear, she had the sinking feeling her plan was about to fall apart before she even opened the front door. Press that like button because there is a lot more coming. Say something in comment telling me if you trust Priscilla now, or if you think there's still something she's not saying. Here is where everything comes together, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Collins Ferris hung up the phone the moment Sable walked through the door, and the look on his face told her he already knew something was wrong, even before she said a word. Sable, he said, voice rough. I was just about to call you. Who was that? Sable asked, setting the folder on the kitchen table between them. The bank, Collins said. They're calling the loan early. 90 days, not 8 months. Somebody bought the note from them this afternoon. A holding company I've never heard of. Sable's stomach dropped straight through the floor. Priscilla had warned them Sua's husband might move faster once he suspected they were closing in. He had not waited long at all. How is that even legal? Sable asked. Can they just do that? Buy someone's debt and change the terms? Apparently, Collins said, rubbing a hand over his face. The original loan had a clause about the note being transferable. I signed it without thinking twice 2 years ago, back when I was just grateful anybody would lend us the money at all. Dad, Sable said carefully, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Collins sat down slowly at the table, and for the first time in Sable's whole life, he looked like a man with nothing left to control. All right, he said, I'm listening. So Sable told him everything. The letters her grandmother had hidden behind the closet wall, the rumor's true origin, Priscilla's real relationship to their family, the folder, now sitting between them, with its cold legal language describing exactly how someone intended to take the only home either of them had ever known. She spoke evenly, the way Priscilla had told her to, carrying hard news without letting it knock her down. When she finished, Collins sat quietly for a long moment, staring at the folder without opening it. All this time, he said, I thought I was protecting you by keeping the money troubles separate from the wedding, separate from everything about Dahlia's promise. Turns out I was just handing you half a picture and calling it kindness. You were trying, Sable said. I know that, but I need the whole picture now. Whatever happens next, I need to be standing in it with you, not off to the side of it. 90 days, Collins said finally. That's not enough time to refinance anywhere else. Not with a local bank, not with anybody who isn't already circling like they want something from us. Then we don't refinance, Sable said. We fight this a different way. How? By making sure everyone at that dinner in 3 days knows exactly what was done and exactly who did it, Sable said. Priscilla has the proof. Jun-won has his father's attention. And I am done letting other people decide how this story ends for us. Collins looked at his daughter for a long moment, something shifting behind his tired eyes. Your grandmother used to say the same thing, almost word for word. Maybe I got more from her than just old letters, Sable said. 2 days later, Sable stood outside the Song family's lake house, the same wide windows and dark which she remembered faintly from childhood stories her grandmother used to tell. Jun-won met her at the door before she could knock. You look like you haven't slept, he said. I haven't, Sable admitted. 90 days is not a lot of time to save a bookstore that's been in my family for 3 generations. We have a plan, Jun-won said. It might not be a comfortable one, but we have one. Walk me through it again, Sable said. I want to make sure I don't freeze up in there. You won't, Jun-won said. But if it helps, we let Priscilla lay out the paperwork first calmly, like the lawyer she is. My father will ask the questions that matter. And I just need to hold steady and make sure nobody in that room can pretend this is a misunderstanding once it's finished. Sable nodded, smoothing down the front of her coat, steadying herself the way she had at the wedding, chin lifted, ready to be looked at without flinching. Inside, the dinner was already underway when Sable arrived, low conversation drifting from the dining room, glasses catching the light from the chandelier above the long table. Jun-won Song sat at the head as expected, and beside him sat a man Sable had never met, but recognized instantly from Priscilla's folder. Sua's husband, calm and pleasant-looking, the kind of face that gave away nothing. Priscilla sat further down the table, a folder of her own resting near her elbow, unopened, waiting. Miss Ferris, Jun-won said, rising slightly as she entered. I did not expect you tonight. I invited her, Jun-won said simply, taking a seat beside her. Sua's husband smiled, easy and warm. A pleasure. I've heard a great deal about the Ferris family bookstore. Quite the piece of history down there, on the water. It is, Sable said, holding his gaze, which is probably why somebody's been so interested in it lately. The table went quiet. Jun-won set down his glass slowly. I'm not sure I follow, Sua's husband said, though something in his posture had shifted, subtle but unmistakable. I think you follow just fine, Jun-won said, his voice level but firm. You hired a man named Rutherfield to gather information on the Ferris family months before this marriage was ever announced. You spread a rumor through my own aunt to delay or collapse the alliance. And 2 days ago, you had the note on their bookstore's loan purchased and called early 90 days instead of the original terms. Sua's husband set down his fork, his smile thinning at the edges. That is a very serious accusation to make at a dinner table. It is not an accusation, Jun-won said. It is documented. Contracts. Correspondence. A very clear pattern that leads directly back to you. Priscilla slid her own folder across the table toward Jun-won without a word, calm and deliberate, the way she probably handled every difficult case in her career. I've spent the better part of a year building this file, she said. Bank records, the development contract, correspondence between your associate and Rutherfield going back 14 months. I did not bring it here to embarrass anyone. I brought it here because the Ferris family deserves to keep what belongs to them, and I was not willing to let that happen quietly. Jun-won opened the folder, flipping through the pages slowly, his expression darkening with each one. He turned to look at the man beside him, and whatever calm had been sitting on his face a moment ago disappeared entirely. Is this true? He asked, quiet in a way that seemed to carry more weight than shouting would have. Hyun-ki, be reasonable, the man said, his tone shifting, quicker now, less steady. The land was undervalued for years. I saw an opportunity. That is business. It has nothing to do with family. It has everything to do with family, Hyun-ki said. You used my niece to spread lies about a woman who had done nothing to deserve it. You used a debt my own father made to try and steal land from people who trusted us to honor it. The debt was never mine to honor. The man snapped, some of the polish finally cracking. I married into this family. I don't owe some old promise from a fire 40 years ago anything. You owe honesty, Priscilla said, evenly. At minimum, you spent months building a plan around a family's grief and a debt of gratitude, hoping nobody would notice until it was too late to stop you. Sable felt something steady settle inside her at that. Whatever fear had been building in her chest for days, watching him say it out loud, plainly, without shame, made the whole thing feel smaller somehow. Less like a shadow she couldn't see the edges of, and more like exactly what it was. You don't have to honor the promise, Sable said, but you do have to answer for fraud and for deliberately sabotaging a family's livelihood for profit. Those are not the same thing as an old debt. Those are crimes. You cannot prove any of this, the man said, though his voice had lost most of its earlier confidence. Actually, Priscilla said, tapping the folder in front of Hyun-ki, I can. Every signature, every wire transfer, every contact between you and Rutherfield. I did not bring copies tonight. I brought originals from a file that has already been shared with a colleague of mine at a firm in Grand Rapids. In the event anything happened to me before I could present it myself. That was not paranoia. That was preparation. The table went silent again, heavier this time. Even Hyun-ki seemed briefly at a loss for words, staring down at the folder like it had aged him several years in the space of a few minutes. What happens now? Sable asked quietly, looking at Hyun-ki rather than the man across from her. The dinner did not end well for Sua's husband. Hyun-ki, once he understood the full scope of what had happened, moved with a kind of quiet efficiency that made it clear exactly how he had built the business he ran. Calls were made before dessert was even cleared. By the following week, the holding company that had purchased the Ferris family's loan quietly reversed the transaction, the original terms restored, no explanation offered publicly beyond a clerical correction. Sua's husband did not attend another family gathering after that night. Sable heard, secondhand through Delphine, that Sua herself had asked for time apart from him, though nobody in the family spoke of it directly. Something stayed quiet even after the truth came out. Maybe some things always would. Hyun-ki visited the bookstore himself. A few days after the dinner, something Sable had not expected at all. He stood awkwardly near the front counter, looking at the shelves like a man unused to spaces that did not involve business. I owe your family an apology, he said. Not just for what happened with the loan, for letting the rumor stand as long as I did, even understanding some of the reasons behind it. I told myself protecting the alliance mattered more than protecting your comfort. I was wrong to draw that line so easily. Why didn't you just tell Jun-won what you suspected? Sable asked. It would have saved everyone a lot of guessing. Because I did not know how much to trust my own suspicions, Hyun-ki admitted, and because I am not a man accustomed to admitting uncertainty out loud, even to my own son. That is a flaw I am aware of. Awareness does not always translate to change quickly. Maybe start small, Sable said. He would probably appreciate even that much. Hyun-ki studied her for a moment, something almost like respect settling into his expression. You remind me a great deal of your grandmother, in ways I did not expect. She had that same way of saying difficult things plainly without cruelty, but without letting anyone off easy either. I'll take that as a compliment, Sable said. It was meant as one, Hyun-ki said. Dahlia chose well all those years ago, deciding your family and mine belonged connected somehow. I did not understand that until now. Priscilla came by the bookstore a week later, sitting at the same counter where Sable had first opened her grandmother's letters. I owe you an apology, Sable said, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. I thought you were the villain in all of this for a while. You had every reason to think that, Priscilla said. I gave you very little to go on otherwise. I've spent most of my life being careful with what I share, sometimes too careful. Your grandmother used to tell me that too. She said I loved this family the way some people love from behind glass. Close enough to see everything, too scared to let anyone see me back. Maybe that changes now, Sable said. Maybe, Priscilla agreed, a small smile crossing her face. I'd like that, actually, being part of this family out loud. Instead of quietly from the edges, you could start coming to Sunday dinners, Sable offered. Nothing fancy, just family. Priscilla's eyes softened in a way Sable had not seen from her before, something almost vulnerable breaking through the careful composure she usually carried. I would like that very much. Collins stood at the window of the bookstore that evening, watching the snow start again outside, lighter this time, drifting instead of falling. I never wanted you to carry any of this, he said, when Sable came to stand beside him. The debt, the marriage, any of it. I wanted to protect you from all of it the way your grandmother protected me for as long as she could. I know, Sable said, but I don't need protecting from the truth, Dad. I need you to trust me with it. That's different. Collins nodded slowly, something loosening in his shoulders that had been tight for months. Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled all this. I don't say that lightly. I had help, Sable said. A lot of it, actually. Priscilla, Jun-won, even Delphine, believe it or not. Delphine, Collins repeated, almost smiling. That girl notices more than anybody gives her credit for. She does, Sable agreed. Maybe we should all start giving people more credit around here. Might save us a few closed doors and hidden letters next time. Collins let out a short laugh, tired but genuine, the first real laugh Sable had heard from him in weeks. Fair point. I'll work on it. So will I, Sable said. I've been holding some things close too, this past year. Guess it runs in the family. Guess it does, Colin said. He reached over and squeezed her shoulder once, the same steady gesture he had used since she was small, the one that always meant more than any of his words did. Thank you for fighting for this place. For all of us, really. It's ours, Sable said, simply. Wasn't going to let it go without a fight. Jun-won found her outside the bookstore later that night, snow settling quietly on the sidewalk between them. Your father called mine, he said something about wanting to redraw the terms of the original arrangement. Properly this time. Nothing hidden, nothing assumed. What did that mean, Sable asked. It means whatever happens between us now happens because we choose it, Jun-won said, not because of a promise made before either of us was born. Not because of debt or land or anything our families decided for us. Sable considered that, watching the snow catch in the streetlight. And if I choose to take things slow, Actually get to know you, the real version, not the letters, not the rumors, not any of it. Then we take things slow, Jun-won said. I've waited this long without even knowing you existed. I can wait a little longer to get it right. What does slow look like to you? Sable asked, curious despite herself. Sable considered the question seriously, the way he seemed to consider most things. Dinner sometime, maybe. Ordinary dinner. Not a family arrangement, not a business meeting. Just two people talking, finding out if there's actually something here worth building, separate from everything that brought us together in the first place. That sounds surprisingly simple, Sable said. For a man who grew up surrounded by contracts and arrangements, maybe that's exactly why it appeals to me, Jun-won said. Something that isn't complicated for once. Something nobody negotiated on my behalf. I think I'd like that, Sable said. Sable smiled at that, small and honest. My grandmother spent 6 years writing to Scared Kid because she believed he'd grow into someone worth knowing. I think I'd like the chance to find out if she was right on my own terms this time. I'd like that too, Jun-won said. They stood there a while longer, the bookstore glowing warm behind them, the lake somewhere beyond the rooftops, quiet and endless under the snow. Whatever came next, arranged or not, promised or not, it finally felt like something they were choosing together, one honest conversation at a time. Not a debt paid, not an old promise settled, just two people standing in the snow, deciding for themselves what came next. Spring came slower that year than usual, the way it always seemed to in Marquette, ice holding onto the lake longer than anyone wanted it to. But it came, eventually, the way it always did. Delphine started working part-time at the bookstore that April, insisting she deserved credit for cracking the case, as she liked to call it, even though most of the actual work had come from Priscilla's folder and Min-jun's quiet digging. Sable let her have the bragging rights anyway. It seemed like the least she owed her. Min-jun visited twice that spring, mostly on Jun-won's behalf, though Sable suspected he had started to enjoy the excuse to see Marquette for reasons that had little to do with business. He never said much about it, directly. He did not have to. Delphine, for a part, seemed to notice exactly why he kept finding reasons to stop by and teased Sable about it mercilessly every time he left. Suar reached out once, in early May, a short letter, careful and a little stiff, apologizing for her part in spreading a rumor she had believed without questioning closely enough. She admitted, near the end of the letter, that she had wanted to believe the worst about a stranger because it was easier than admitting her own husband might be capable of something so calculated. Sable wrote back. It was not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but it was a start, and starts mattered more than most people gave them credit for. As for Sable and Jun-won, they kept their word to each other. Dinner first, ordinary and unremarkable, the kind neither of them had experienced in longer than they wanted to admit. Then another. Then enough of them that neither bothered counting anymore. Sable still kept her grandmother's letters in the wooden box, though she had moved it from the closet to a shelf behind the bookstore counter, somewhere she could see it every day. Sometimes on slow afternoons, she would take one out and read it again, tracing the careful, slanted handwriting of a woman who had seen something worth protecting long before anyone else understood what it was. She liked to think Dahlia would have approved of how things turned out, not because the plan had worked exactly as intended, but because, in the end, nobody had been forced into anything they did not choose for themselves. That more than any promise or any debt, felt like the truest kind of inheritance anyone could leave behind. And that's the story. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for writing this one out with me, because this was a journey from start to finish. Let me know in the comments which twist hit you the hardest, because I read every single one of them. Make sure you are already subscribed because there is a lot more where this came from, and I promise you do not want to miss what's next.